So then we are back with more understandings from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, very fine Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Israelic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end as per Yeshayahu the prophet. We find layers of understanding of the spring feast, the autumn feast, and also the returning of the holy cities of the Hamashiach laid waste from many centuries. Reading from Yeshayahu the prophet, it's very important making a very precise understanding of what the time of the restoration period is, and also the time of the autumn feast, because there are some very interesting news regarding the system of China. During these many audio recordings of years ago, at least 40 years ago, it was said many times that the Chinese system is coming, the Chinese system is coming, and the Chinese system is coming. So then, it was obviously a very important situation regarding then the Chinese system, a telescope projecting a red beacon beam, and this particular signal, named as quantum, is very important development, because as they can make an absolute, private, and very important unbreakable code of a beam that can be sent into the space, and there is a period of time when the machines are lined up properly, that this particular beam can give a window of some 10 minutes, and this particular beam, simply there is no way of tap into it. Now then, as it was said before, China is already working in a system of investment, the system of trade. Now comes the great maritime, and also via ships, also via trains, trucks, aircrafts, and the Silk Road, or the One Belt system, being developed and refurbished. And this particular signal obviously is going to get used by this new trade system. So, as it was then explained, as hard as it is for this government to start working seriously regarding then the taxation via online, our government is so far behind schedule regarding then what's coming in the very near future, regarding then the simple trade with the known monetary systems, centralized systems. Our country is already far away from understanding the importance of internet trade and proper taxation. Now then is coming up more and more decentralized monetary systems. Our country is not ready for it. And then comes this new beam that was already known previously from last year, but now they're going to use this particular beam as a network system, obviously involving banking, involving investment, and most importantly the Chinese system. And the equipment in the space obviously is already available for it. Yet our country, that should have a very flexible network of trade, is very far behind. So then, as far as citizens of this country, and observing very closely what then the Pacific is doing, it is amazing the amount of time that is taking this government becoming conscientious of the great danger that this system can pose. Now, the danger comes from being part of an honest system. This may sound strange, but this very sound system of China is going to dominate the world's market. And the problem is, our country is not ready for it. So then, where can we find in the scripture regarding this particular salvation of the system, salvation of trade, as obviously there is the salvation that comes from the scripture, and there is the salvation coming from the very scripture regarding the relining up of the trade as it was intended. Now then, in Yeshaya, the 23rd chapter, gives us a few clues at the period of time is, from the standpoint of the scripture, a very important period, because it shows the legalization and the cleaning up of this absolutely dirty system that the New World Order has generated. Now then, there are many kinds of other topics that should explain these, but in Yeshayahu, the 23rd chapter, explains then that the merchants of the earth in the trade of the time of the end, and obviously the contempt of pride of the nations, because they know for sure they have not done a proper work, and they know they have done dirty deals, and they have done what is shameful. Now then, the salvation of trade comes from the east, as the scripture is very clear. Now then, why it's coming from the east? Because the kingdom of the east is the kingdom of China. Now then, there are sovereignties of countries and many borders that should be respected, and they are respected in many cases. Now then, when it comes to the internet, then the situation is not as easy as it was before. And the reason is because trade is coming via online. In this trade, obviously, people can use centralized money or decentralized money. And there are a few countries that can have a flexible network, so then they can charge the proper taxes. Now then, the tricky portion of it is establishing a system that a person, a regular user of a computer, can have banking with the Chinese bank and do trade with China, and then using flexible monetary systems, they can simply properly and duly pay their taxes. Now then, from this portion of Yeshaya, the 23rd chapter and the 9th verse, it speaks of the word in Hebrew obviously is then very specific regarding then the traders, and obviously these were taught by Abraham. There are some principles that were taught before, and these principles for many centuries were not exercised, and that's why the nations are in absolutely despair, because simply the economies are not improving. So then, China has come with an unbreakable system of codes. As far as what then Revelation explains. Now then, obviously, when people read the scripture and understand each content related or layers, then the layer of Yeshaya, the 23rd chapter, obviously lines up with Revelation, because the content is similar. So then in the 8th chapter of Galah, a person finds then the scripture explaining then the merchants of the earth. And time again, the merchants of the earth are mentioned. Now, why these merchants are mentioned more than the kingdoms of the earth? Now, it must have a reason. As it was explained before, the Chinese system is coming, and this system of the East that's going to take over the world, it must have some sort of a system where then exclusivity is given for the purposes of regulating the amount of tax, a fair share of taxes, and proper investment. Now then, reading from the news, this new unbreakable code, obviously there are already signs of a new signal regarding trade, network, investments, and most importantly, cryptography. Now then, since the 70s, China has launched more than 100 of these amazing, ingenious machines into the space for weather and disaster monitoring. Now China is obviously using a system of navigation. So we can certainly understand the importance of these new type of system and this particular beam that can send information and nobody can read it. So as was said before many times, the Chinese system is coming. Now then, Revelation, the 8th chapter, explains many important topics regarding then the merchants of the earth. Merchants of the earth, and then the third part of the ships, they were destroyed. Chapter 1:8, much later, number-wise but not chronological-wise, explains then the merchants of the earth again during the time of the restoration period. So the merchants of the earth are very important during this period, more than the governments. Not because the freighters are taking over over the governments, but because the great source of taxes are coming from the freighters because of the data that they are gathering. And since the governments are very far behind on their network, making them absolutely not responsible, because they are simply relying on the money printing machine, and they are acting like ostriches. When situations are not easy, they stick their heads on the ground, thinking that the world simply is going to veer towards what they are thinking and doing. And that's no longer the case. So then, speaking positively, the network and the servers of the government are not ready for the coming of these data from the freighters. At the moment that China launches its system, and there are already indications of this new quantum beam, and when they are ready for it, and people who have link with this system in their computers, they don't want to even imagine how they're going to charge taxes. It's already incredible that they are not taking action as far as taxation with an open system as it is at the moment. Later on, when there is a system they can't even read, yet active, how are they going to charge taxes? So, as it was said before, the greatest plan of the Chinese government is each person on the planet with a computer can have a link with the Chinese bank and do trade via online. As people, they were laughing when it was said that each person on the earth, or most people on the earth, would have a computer at home. People were laughing. And not very many decades later, the situation did take place. Now a step further, so then the words of Daniel becomes popular, then the knowledge would increase for the purposes of trade, because Daniel was the minister of finances. Thus then, lining up with Daniel, the 11th chapter, because it's related with the time of the restoration period, and then explains a system in the world that was weakened, and another system that was stronger. So we have a lot of catch up to do before this system coming from the east takes over the world, and then our country would not be able to deal with it. And when the freighters, they are ready for delivery of the packages, they are not interested if the government is ready for taxes or not. As long as the freighters are paid for, they get their packages and they deliver them. They are not going to wait around for the government to receive taxes. If the government is not ready for it, they simply won't receive taxes. And the packages must have them delivered. So that's the problem dealing with governments and rich people in the government. Because they already had so much for so long, they don't understand what it means of becoming regulars. So some of these higher up realms, they are desensitized because they already have so much. Now then, when the system from the East that's already have taken over our country, because our debt is so tremendously high, and then by the Chinese doing a work that is honest online, how can we prevent from taking place? Simply, it can't. And our nation is going to get in a very tight position because the government won't know what to do. Now then, not only this, then they have to deal with the infrastructure. They have to deal with ships coming in and out of the harbor. And to have to deal with the decentralized monetary systems, because the world is not going to be waiting around for other nations to line up with the flexible network. It might be a fancy term such as quantitative easing, not to say directly printing out more money. So then, governments before were able to deceive in a very high levels. In today's society, they can't do as much. Now then, people are not judgmental of those people who have a lot. The only problem is the system itself no longer can understand those types of systems that were set up during the period of the New World Order, because this period of time has ended. Now what's coming in the future is not the New World Order. What's coming in the future is simply the restoration of trade as per the instructions of the Scripture. Thus then the distinction from the 1,000 years that did not work versus the 1,000 years that did work versus the short period of time of the restoration, and then the end of it is the autumn feast. Thus then the 23rd chapter of Vaikra then is completed. Now how is the government going to tackle the problem? That's why they get paid the big money, so they can come up with answers. So, from the standpoint of the Eastern system, as they are already working with the flexible networks, as even the nation, even the holy nation, have the virtual money of their own. Now, how much more can a person explain so then the government can understand that the flexible network is extremely important? Why they drag around themselves with a country on the Korean Peninsula of throwing a tube with fuel in the ocean? Why are they not investing their strengths and their understanding in adjusting the wrecked economy of this country, including the network? And there they are, these government people walking around as big shots and going from a place to the other and going there and sticking their nose in someone else's problem over there on the other side of the world, and they are not doing their homework. Absolutely shameful. Why the taxpayers' money are then paying so much money for these incompetent people. Nobody's saying that they shouldn't be monitored. But what has North Korea done thus far? Throwing a metal tube with some electronics and fuel into the ocean. That's the reality of it. Now, should they be monitored? Of course. And what about our own country? What about our system? Are we prepared for this new system in the world? Or are we going to scramble ourselves when the system comes, and then it would be a Pearl Harbor of the trade of the end? That's what this government is set itself for. And going around and firing people and pointing fingers at people. Yeah, we have a president that does not know how to cultivate, does not know how to become flexible, rather than cultivating people so they can improve themselves. No, it's simply eliminated. While it's not giving any kind of a network hope for those who are involved with it. And worst yet, people are absolutely aware of the economy that's not doing as it was doing before. The virtual monetary systems are popular than ever. The industrialists are back them up. Yet the government simply is oblivious. And they are doing the same things as during the time of the New World Order, as they are doing during this time of the Restoration period. And they already have a sense that what they are doing is not working. Now, do they not have money? Don't they have raw materials? So the question is, why isn't working? Why are they so concerned with problems on the other side of the world from a person that's throwing a tube with fuel in the ocean? Is it more important than take care of our own economy? But this is what the Hamashiach has said. You're going to hear of wars and rumors of wars. And there we are. You know, our country has become a country that lives on rumors. And then the Hebraic scripture is absolutely clear. Start reading there, understanding. And the importance of the network and the trade that people are going to link themselves with. And they don't have to have USD anymore to do trade with the world. That's the tricky part of it. They can get products with some other kinds of money. Yet the delivery is the same. Now then, when the truth is said and then people get angry on top of it, not having the answers for the problem, not only they are incompetent, then they are prideful on top of it. So I have to deal with the incompetence of the government plus its own stupid pride. So, the words of the scripture are very important. Revelation truly explains not only the salvation of human beings, but also the salvation of the trade as it was taught those principles by Abraham. Reading from the instructions is very easy understanding. Traders that were involved with Abraham, they would not cheat, they would not lie, they would not change the weights of their trade, and they were honest. These are trades that were exercised for centuries. So, when we read Yeshayahu, the 23rd chapter, then we understand the 9th verse we're making a reference of. So please stay tuned, much more coming up.